I returned my finals badge at 7:18 in the morning, 3 hours before the examination hall opened, and the security officer looked at me as if I had just handed him a live snake. "You know you need this to enter Building A today," he said, turning the plastic card over in his fingers, checking my photograph, my student number, the strip of blue foil at the bottom that said Senior Scholar Exam Access. I smiled at him through the tiny glass window of the security booth and said, "I know." Behind me, the campus was still half asleep. The jacaranda trees along the path were dripping purple petals after last night's rain. The concrete shone like it had been polished, and the huge banners for the national finals hung from the library pillars like flags before a battle. 3 years ago, no, in the life before this one, I had clutched that same badge like it was proof I belonged here. I had checked my bag 6 times, smoothed my uniform twice, and stepped into the examination building with all my notes memorized and my entire future balanced on a 2-hour paper. By noon, my badge had been found in a restricted server room, my login had appeared in the exam paper download records, and my rival, Celeste Ward, had cried in front of the disciplinary panel about how heartbroken she was to discover her best friend had cheated. I lost my scholarship, my place at Arden Preparatory Academy, my admission offer to medical school, and later, when my mother's hospital bills arrived, I lost almost everything else too. But this morning, I had woken up 17 years old again with a scar on my wrist gone, my mother alive downstairs making toast, and Celeste's good luck message blinking on my phone like a pretty little knife. So, I did not wear the badge. I did not tuck it into my blazer pocket. I did not let it swing from my lanyard where any sweet-voiced liar could borrow it for 1 second. I signed the return register with a black pen, wrote the exact time beside my name, asked Officer Marlowe to initial the line, and slid my phone onto the counter with the camera recording openly. For my records, I said because girls like me were always told to have proof only after it was too late. He frowned, then shrugged and stamped the receipt. 1 hard red mark. Badge returned. Chain of custody accepted. That sound was the first door closing on my old death. Celeste called me exactly 11 minutes later, which meant someone had already noticed the empty hook in the badge rack where my card should have been. Her voice came through light and breathless, all sugar over glass. "Mara, where are you?" "I'm by the east stairs. We're taking our pre-final photo, remember?" In my first life, I had run to her when she called because Celeste never sounded demanding. She sounded chosen by sunlight. She was the kind of girl teachers described as sincere, parents described as elegant, and boys described as harmless, which was the most dangerous mask a person could wear at 17. She had honey blonde hair she curled only at the ends, a ribbon tied around her wrist for every exam, and the practiced habit of touching her arm when she spoke so other people would see intimacy even where there was none. "I'm near administration," I told her, watching Officer Marlowe place my badge into the sealed drawer. I had something to submit. There was the smallest pause, a little click inside her silence. "Submit? Today?" She laughed once, too softly. "You're so organized it's scary. Bring your badge and hurry. I want one with you before everything gets insane." "I don't have it anymore." This time the pause widened until I could hear the rainwater dripping from the awning above me. "What do you mean you don't have it anymore?" "I returned it early." A car hissed through a puddle on the road behind the booth. "Why would you do that?" she asked, still sweet, but the sweetness had flattened at the edges. I looked at my stamped receipt. I remembered her in the disciplinary room, eyes swollen from tears she had manufactured in a bathroom mirror, whispering, "I wish she had asked for help instead of doing something so desperate." I remembered the principal refusing to meet my gaze. I remembered my mother's trembling hand on my shoulder. I said, "Because the exam policy says early badge return is allowed if identity is verified manually at the main gate. It reduces liability if a badge is lost." Another silence. Then a tiny breath. "Mara, nobody does that."
"Ido."
"But the manual line is so slow. You'll be late." I arrived early. "You're acting weird." There it was. Not concern. Assessment. Celeste was checking the shape of the trap and finding my foot missing from it. "Nerves," I said. "Good luck, Celeste." I hung up before she could say my name again, because in my first life, every time she said it, I thought it meant I mattered to her. In this life, it sounded like a key turning in someone else's lock. The old Mara would have gone straight to the library and reviewed respiratory physiology until her hands shook. The reborn Mara went to the registrar's office, where Mrs. Vale kept a tray of peppermint candies and a memory sharper than any camera. I asked for a manual identity verification letter for the finals entrance, and when she told me students usually just use their badges, I placed my stamped receipt beside the keyboard and asked if she could print 2 copies. "You returned it," she said, peering at the receipt over her red glasses. "On finals day?" "Yes, ma'am." She looked at me for a long second, and I wondered what she saw. The top-ranked scholarship girl with her hair pinned too neatly, or the ghost of a woman who had spent years replaying one stolen morning until every movement became a map. "Smart," she said at last, surprising me. Annoying for security, but smart. She printed the letter, signed it in blue ink, and added her office seal when I asked. Then I requested something no student had ever requested before, a copy of the badge return policy. She tilted her head. "For your peace of mind?" "For my peace," I said. "And maybe for my future." She smiled like she understood enough not to ask. While the printer hummed, my phone buzzed with messages. "Celeste, you seriously returned it?" "Celeste, why didn't you tell me?" "Celeste, we were supposed to enter together." "Theo, Celeste says you're upset?" "Theo, did something happen?" "Priya, babe, did you just break tradition?" Everyone's talking. That was the first pattern interruption of the day. I was not the accused yet, not the frantic girl defending herself after evidence appeared like a curse. I was the strange girl who had done something boring, procedural, and impossible to twist. A returned badge was not dramatic. A stamped receipt did not cry. A chain of custody drawer did not care how pretty Celeste looked when she lied. By 8 o'clock, the campus had filled with the sharp, bright panic of finals morning. Students moved in clusters under the covered walkways, clutching clear pencil cases and water bottles with labels stripped off. Teachers stood at building entrances holding clipboards, their smiles stretched thin from caffeine and duty. Above the main gate, the black security cameras blinked red in slow, patient intervals. Every senior wore the blue exam badge on a lanyard except me. That absence became louder than jewelry. Heads turned. Whispers ran ahead of me. "Is that Mara? Where's her badge? Did she lose it?" "She looks calm, though." In the first life, I had hated being watched. I had mistaken visibility for danger. Now I understood that invisibility had been Celeste's weapon. She moved behind people's assumptions, borrowing their trust like coats. So I let them watch. I walked down the center path with my manual verification letter in one hand and my receipt in the other, not hidden, not folded, not apologetic. Priya found me near the fountain and grabbed my sleeve. "Tell me this is a genius top student thing and not a breakdown." Her curls were escaping her ponytail, and her eyeliner was uneven because she had probably done it in the bus mirror. In the old life, Priya had testified that I looked stressed and secretive before the exam, not because she hated me, but because Celeste had fed everyone a story and grief had done the rest. I had resented her for years. Today, I simply showed her the receipt. I returned my badge early. Manual entry is allowed. Priya blinked. "Why?" I could have told her everything. I could have said, because today someone is going to try to make my badge appear where it should never be. Because your friend Celeste knows the security blind spot between the east stairs and the server corridor. Because by lunchtime, she plans to be crying into a tissue while my life burns. Instead, I said, because finals bring out strange behavior in people. Priya looked over my shoulder, and her expression changed. "Speaking of strange," she muttered. Celeste was crossing the courtyard toward us, her lanyard swinging, her smile perfect, her eyes not smiling at all. She hugged me before I could step back, because Celeste always performed affection in public first, and asked permission never. "Mara," she said, loud enough for 3 nearby groups to hear. "You scared me. I thought something awful happened." Her perfume was jasmine and pear, the same scent that had clung to the borrowed scarf found in my locker after the first investigation. "Nothing awful," I said. "Just paperwork." She released me and lowered her voice, leaving her hand on my arm like a soft restraint. You should have told me. I could have helped. You know people misunderstand you when you get intense. There it was, the tiny blade slipped between ribs. Mara is intense. Mara is brilliant but unstable. Mara does odd things under pressure. I looked at her hand until she removed it. I don't need help returning a badge. Celeste's lashes fluttered. Of course not. I didn't mean, you did. Priya inhaled. 2 boys near the fountain stopped pretending not to listen. Celeste's face changed by 1 careful degree, not enough for anyone else to call anger, enough for me to know the puppet strings had tightened. Mara, she whispered, don't do this today. In my first life, those words would have made me panic. Don't do this. Don't embarrass us. Don't make a scene. Don't force people to see the hook inside the kindness. But Rebirth does something terrible and useful to a person. It makes fear repetitive. I had already been ruined by this girl. I had already watched adults choose her tears over my evidence. I had already learned how quickly a reputation could be killed if the murderer wore a ribbon. I'm not doing anything, I said. That's the point. Her mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at my hands, at the receipt, at the letter, and for the first time that morning, I saw the calculation fail behind her eyes. Not collapse.
Fail.
There is a difference. Collapse is loud. Failure is a small private gap, where certainty used to be. At 8:30, our homeroom advisor gathered the senior scholars under the covered court for final instructions. Mr. Harlan had been handsome once and knew it forever, with silver at his temples and a voice trained for assemblies. In my first life, he had sat on the panel and said, Mara, sometimes gifted students make catastrophic choices because they cannot tolerate imperfection. I had begged him to check the badge return logs, the camera angles, the server timestamp. He had sighed, as if my desperation bore him. Today he clicked his pen against the clipboard and told us to hold our badges visible at chest height. Then his eyes landed on my empty blazer. Miss Fay, he said. Badge.
Half the court looked at me.
Celeste did not. She stared at her shoes. Return to security at 7:18, I said, lifting the receipt. Manual verification letter issued by the registrar. Mr. Harlan's eyebrows rose. Unusual. Permitted. A few students made the sort of tiny sound people make when someone corrects a teacher without raising her voice. Mr. Harlan's mouth tightened, then professional pride forced it into a smile. Indeed. You'll enter through the main gate with Officer Marlowe. Yes, sir. Everyone else, badges only. Do not lend your badge, remove your badge, swap lanyards, cover your photograph, or attempt entry through staff corridors. Any breach before or during finals will be treated as misconduct. He said it like routine. I heard it like prophecy. Celeste's fingers moved to the ribbon around her wrist and began twisting it. In the old timeline, she had asked me after this announcement to hold her water bottle while she fixed her shoe. She had unclipped my badge in the crowd with fingers as light as moth wings, swapped it with a counterfeit weight on my lanyard, and by the time I noticed the wrong badge, panic had made me run exactly where she wanted. Toward the east corridor, toward the camera that showed me near the restricted wing, toward guilt shaped like confusion. Today my lanyard was in my bag, without a card. There was nothing for her to take. That did not mean she stopped trying. Celeste was not stupid. Cruel girls who survive on charm are often excellent improvisers. After the briefing, Theo approached with 2 coffees from the vending kiosk, one in each hand, his exam badge tucked neatly under his collar, as if the rules were decorative for boys who played violin at charity galas. He had been my academic partner, then my almost boyfriend, then the person who said, I want to believe you, Mar, but Celeste wouldn't lie about something this serious. In the years after expulsion, I had hated him with a special fury reserved for people who almost loved us and still chose comfort over truth. Now, looking at his worried face, I felt something cooler. He had not been my executioner. He had been a witness who closed his eyes. That was bad enough. Celeste said you're spiraling, he said, offering me coffee. I did not take it. Did she? He winced. Not like that. She said you were anxious and making extreme choices. Returning school property according to policy is extreme? On finals day, yes. His honesty was almost refreshing. I pointed to the security booth across the courtyard. The school requires students to protect their badges. I protected mine by placing it in official custody. Theo looked at the receipt, then back at me. That's actually not irrational. Careful. You'll ruin the narrative. He lowered the coffees. What narrative? Before I could answer, Celeste appeared beside him, slipping her arm through his with the ease of someone claiming territory. The narrative where we all pass finals and stop interrogating Mara like she's on trial, she said brightly. Theo smiled, relieved by her normalness. I watched him relax and understood how she had done it to everyone. Celeste did not simply lie. She gave people a version of reality where they did not have to feel brave. At 9:15, the first security checkpoint opened and the line formed under the glass canopy. Students pressed forward in nervous waves, badges scanned one by one against a tablet mounted on a stand. Green light, soft beep, enter. Green light, soft beep, enter. The sound folded into my heartbeat. I joined the shorter manual verification line by the main booth, where Officer Marlowe stood with the registrar's list. Some students glanced at me with curiosity, but most were too busy whispering formulas to care. Celeste entered the badge line 4 rows ahead, Theo behind her, Priya behind him. She did not look back once. That was how I knew she had chosen her second move. In the old life, the accusation did not happen at the entrance. It happened later, when my badge was discovered in the wrong place. If Celeste could not take my badge from my lanyard, she needed another version of it, counterfeit, stolen earlier, or digitally cloned through the access kiosk where student aides sometimes updated exam permissions. I had spent years thinking she had simply stolen my card. Then, 2 weeks before my mother died, a former IT assistant from Arden had messaged me after seeing my name in an alumni scandal article. He said the system had flagged 2 badge IDs assigned to my student number that morning. 1 physical, 1 temporary duplicate. The duplicate had been authorized using a staff override from an unlocked terminal. The staff override belonged to Mr. Harlan. I had never known whether he helped her knowingly, carelessly, or because Celeste asked with tears in her eyes. I died before I could find out. Rebirth gave me something better than answers. It gave me timing. The line moved slowly. Officer Marlowe checked my letter, my student number, my face, my clear pencil case, the calculator serial number, even the label free water bottle. You understand you'll need an escort if you leave the exam wing, he said. Yes. He marked my name on a printed sheet with a blue tick. That blue tick mattered. It meant I had entered without an active badge. It meant any scan under my student number after 718 would not be mine. One more thing, I said quietly. Can you note that I'm entering manually and have no badge in my possession? He looked up. Already noted. Thank you. He paused, then leaned closer. Someone bothering you, Miss Faye? The question hit a place in me I had armored badly. In the first life, no adult had asked that before the accusation. Afterward, they asked only questions designed to prove I had done it. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to point across the gate at Celeste's pale ribbon and Theo's blind loyalty and Mr. Harlan's clipboard. Instead I said, maybe. I'm not sure yet. Marlowe's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion toward me, but toward the courtyard. Then stay visible. It was simple advice. It was also the opposite of what shame had taught me. So I stepped through the gate and stayed visible. The first alarm sounded when I was halfway across the atrium, and because fate has a sense of theater, it happened exactly as the morning sunlight broke through the clouds and lit the polished floor like a stage. The badge scanner at the side corridor gave one sharp rejected tone, louder and uglier than the soft entrance beeps. A security guard said, "Stop there, please." The atrium quieted in layers. First the students nearest the corridor stopped talking. Then the line behind them stalled. Then the teachers turned. I did not need to see the face to know. My body knew before my eyes did. Celeste stood at the staff side checkpoint with one hand on the scanner stand and the other curled around a badge that was not hanging from her neck. Her own badge still lay against her blazer, photograph visible, blue foil catching the light. In her hand was another badge in a clear sleeve. For one breathtaking second, nobody understood the problem. Then Officer Reyes, the senior guard on the staff corridor, took the loose badge from Celeste's fingers and read the name. His gaze moved across the atrium until it found me. Marave, he called. Every head turned. Celeste's face went white in a way no powder could imitate. And there it was, the old trap trying to open under my feet. In the first life, this was the moment I ran toward the sound, confused, guilty-looking, desperate to reclaim what was mine. Today I did not move. I lifted my empty hands slightly and said, loud enough for the atrium cameras, students, teachers, and security staff, my badge was returned at 7:18 and is in the security drawer. Officer Marlowe has the receipt and chain of custody record. The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Not peaceful. Not safe. Beautiful in the way lightning is beautiful when it strikes the tree you were tied to. Celeste tried to laugh, but it came out too thin. This is ridiculous. I found it near these stairs. I was bringing it to security. Officer Reyes looked at the badge in his hand, then at the staff corridor scanner, then at her. You attempted to scan it? No, I thought it was mine for a second. Priya, bless her newly suspicious soul, said from the student line, your badge is literally around your neck. Theo's face had drained of color. Mr. Harlan strode over with his clipboard pressed to his chest like a shield. What's going on? Officer Reyes handed him the loose badge. Student attempted access to the restricted corridor using Miss Vey's badge. Not using, Celeste said quickly, tears already gathering. She was fast. I had to give her that. I was confused. Everyone is stressed. I saw Mara acting strangely all morning, and then I found this and I thought maybe. She stopped herself perfectly, leaving the accusation unfinished so everyone else's imagination could carry it. Maybe Mara planted it. Maybe Mara lost it. Maybe Mara was involved. The old Mara would have defended herself sentence by sentence until she sounded guilty. The new Mara turned to Officer Marlowe, who had come in from the main gate, holding the return log. Could you please confirm whether the badge in Officer Reyes's hand is the same physical badge currently sealed in your drawer? I asked. Officer Marlowe's expression went from alert to very still. Mr. Harlan said, Miss Vey, let security handle this. Of course, I said. That's why I returned it to security. Marlowe radioed the booth. Another guard answered. The drawer was opened on camera. My original badge, with the tiny scratch across the lower right corner from when I dropped it in chemistry lab, was still sealed in the evidence pouch where Marlowe had placed it. The badge in Celeste's hand had no scratch. The photograph was mine, the student number was mine, the access category was mine, but the card was not mine. A duplicate. A ghost with my face. The atrium changed temperature. You could feel the story people had been ready to believe crack in midair. Mr. Harlan stared at the fake badge as if it had insulted him personally. Celeste began crying. Not the neat tears she saved for teachers. These were panicked, uneven, immediate. I don't know where that came from, she said. I swear. Someone must have put it in my folder. Officer Reyes did not soften. Security guards are not immune to pretty girls, but scanners make them practical. Then we'll review the footage. We have finals, Mr. Harlan snapped, too quickly. This can be investigated after the exam. There. My breath caught, not from fear, but recognition. That same urgency had buried me before. Move the students. Protect the schedule. Preserve the school's reputation. Resolve the scandal quietly. Except this time the scandal was not attached to my body. It was standing under the camera with a duplicate badge and mascara beginning to run. I said, Sir, if a duplicate of my exam access badge exists, shouldn't the exam room be secured before anyone enters? The paper may be compromised. That did what my innocence alone could never do. It threatened the exam. A compromised student could be sacrificed. A compromised national final could not. Within 3 minutes, the atrium became a controlled lockdown zone. Students were directed to sit along the walls. Teachers whispered into phones. The examination board representative, Dr. Anika Sato, arrived from the administration building in a charcoal suit and running shoes, which told me she had not expected drama, but was prepared to chase it. She listened to Officer Reyes, examined the duplicate badge without touching it, then asked one question that cut through everyone's performance. Whose credentials authorized the duplicate? Mr. Harlan said, "We don't know that yet."
Dr. Sato looked at him.
She had the kind of face that made excuses feel underdressed. Then find out. Celeste sat on a bench with Priya near her, but not touching her. Theo hovered 2 steps away, trapped between instinct and evidence. I stayed where the camera could see me. That was not bravery. It was strategy stitched over terror. Inside, my old self was screaming. My body remembered the humiliation before it happened. It remembered being surrounded, questioned, disbelieved. It remembered the principal saying, "Your mother will be notified." It remembered my mother's face in the car afterward, not angry, never angry, just frightened by how easily a future could vanish. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm and reminded myself of the stamped receipt. Paper was stronger than memory today. They moved Celeste, Mr. Harlan, and me into the glass-walled conference room beside the atrium, while the other students waited under supervision. Dr. Sato insisted the walls remain uncovered and the door open. That detail mattered. No private theater. No closed room where tears could become evidence. Officer Marlowe stood just inside the doorway. Officer Reyes stood outside with the duplicate badge sealed in a pouch. Celeste sniffed into a tissue and looked very small in the large leather chair. Mr. Harlan stood behind her, not beside me, which answered one question before anyone asked it. "I found the badge on the floor," Celeste said, voice trembling. "I picked it up because I thought Mara lost it. I was going to bring it back. I must have accidentally tapped it against the scanner because I was nervous." Dr. Sato's pen moved once across her notebook. "Why were you at the staff side restricted corridor?" "Shortcut," Celeste whispered. "Students aren't permitted to use that shortcut."
"I know."
"I wasn't thinking. During the most important exam of your secondary education, while holding another student's access credential at a restricted scanner?" Celeste's lower lip trembled. In my first life, this was usually when an adult rescued her from the discomfort of logic. Dr. Sato did not. Celeste looked at Mr. Harlan. He cleared his throat. "Students often panic on finals day. Celeste has no disciplinary history." "Neither do I said. He turned toward me with the irritated surprise of a man who expected silence from the wrong chair. "Miss Vey, no one accused you." I almost laughed. No one accused me yet, he meant. No one got the chance. Dr. Sato asked me to explain my morning. I did it without drama. Woke at 6, arrived at campus at 7, returned badge at 7:18 to Officer Marlowe, requested receipt, obtained manual verification letter from Mrs. Vale, remained in public areas, entered manually through main gate, never possessed a badge afterward. I gave her the receipt, the duplicate letter, and the printed badge policy. Then I added the detail I had saved until the room was quiet enough to feel it land. I also recorded the badge return with Officer Marlowe's knowledge. Mr. Harlan's head snapped up. Celeste stopped crying for half a second. Dr. Sato held out her hand. I gave her my phone. The video was not cinematic. It showed a sleepy security officer, my hand sliding the badge through the glass slot, the timestamp on the booth monitor, Marlowe stamping the receipt, and my voice asking him to confirm the badge was no longer in my possession. It showed nothing dramatic, which made it devastating. Truth does not always need thunder. Sometimes it needs fluorescent lighting and a bored man with a stamp. Dr. Sato watched it twice. Then she asked Officer Marlowe, "Was this badge placed in sealed storage immediately?" "Yes." "Any chance it was removed before the duplicate was scanned?"
"No."
"The drawer access is logged and recorded," Mr. Harlan said. "Then perhaps the duplicate was created previously as a backup." Dr. Sato turned to him. "Backups are not issued for student finals badges. I'm suggesting an administrative error." Administrative errors usually do not walk themselves to restricted corridors in the hands of rival students.
"Rival."
She said the word clinically, but it struck like a match. Celeste and I had been ranked first and second since year 9. Teachers called it healthy competition because adults love a rivalry they can decorate with awards. Celeste was better at speeches, committees, interviews, charm. I was better at exams, research, the brutal quiet work nobody applauded until scores were published. The scholarship we were sitting for today was not just a certificate. It was a full medical pathway grant, the kind that could lift my mother and me out of rented rooms and overdue bills. In my first life, after I was expelled, Celeste won it. She stood on stage with my stolen future shining around her neck and said, "I dedicate this to every girl who studies honestly." I watched the clip once years later and vomited into a sink. In this life, Dr. Sato understood motive before anyone named it. Celeste understood that she understood and began to panic in a new way. "I would never," she said. "Mara knows I wouldn't. Tell them, Mara." The room looked at me. How many times had girls been forced to soften the knife used against them because refusing looked cruel? I folded my hands on the table. "I know what you show people," I said. "I don't know what you would never do." Celeste flinched as if I had slapped her. Mr. Harlan said sharply, "That's unnecessary." Dr. Sato said, "It's an answer." The IT audit arrived at 9:52, printed by a technician who looked like he wished he had chosen any other career. The duplicate badge had been encoded at 7:46 that morning from Terminal 3 in the staff preparation office. The staff login used to authorize it belonged to Mr. Harlan. The room became so silent I could hear the atrium clock ticking through the open door. Mr. Harlan's face darkened.
Impossible.
Dr. Sato did not blink. "Were you in the staff preparation office at 7:46? "I was preparing exam materials with other advisors." "Was your terminal unlocked?" "I don't recall." "Did you authorize a duplicate badge for Miss Vey?" "Absolutely not." Celeste stared at her hands. That was the second answer. In my first life, I had believed the staff override meant Mr. Harlan had joined the plot fully. Now I saw something uglier and more ordinary. He had left a terminal unlocked. Celeste had used it. Then he had protected the version of events that spared him embarrassment. Carelessness became cover-up. Cover-up became my ruin. Dr. Sato asked Celeste, "Did you access Terminal 3? "No, the room has cameras," Officer Reyes said from the doorway. Celeste's tears stopped. Not slowed.
Stopped.
There are moments when the mask has to decide whether to crack or become a weapon.
Celeste chose weapon.
She stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "Fine," she said, voice shaking, but not with sadness now. I touched the terminal. I was trying to print my accommodation form because the office printer was jammed. Mr. Harlan told me I could. Mr. Harlan looked genuinely startled. I did not. She turned on him with the wild precision of someone dragging another person into the water. "You said it was fine. You said Mara was unstable anyway. You said if something happened, the board would never risk the school's finals over one scholarship girl." The accusation detonated. Mr. Harlan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dr. Sato's pen stopped moving. Officer Marlowe shifted his weight in the doorway. I sat very still while the past rearranged itself. In the first life, I had thought Celeste's betrayal was a clean line. She lied. They believed her. I fell. But corruption rarely travels in straight lines. It spreads through small permissions. A teacher annoyed by a difficult student. A rival desperate for first place. A school terrified of scandal. A boy who trusts the prettiest tears. A friend who repeats what she is told. Celeste realized she had said too much only after the words became air. She clapped both hands over her mouth. Mr. Harlan recovered first. "That is a disgusting lie." "You are going to let her take the blame," Celeste whispered, and now the tears returned because she had found a role again. Not villain, not mastermind, but frightened girl manipulated by authority. "You told me she'd already been flagged for obsessive behavior. You said no one would be surprised." My stomach turned, because even now she was trying to survive by building a bridge from my humiliation to her innocence. Dr. Sato looked from Celeste to Mr. Harlan and said, "No one is leaving this room except to sit the exam under separate supervision." Mr. Harlan laughed once, harshly. "You can't seriously allow these students to sit after this disruption." "I can," Dr. Sato said. "And I will. The exam paper has not been accessed. The restricted server logs show no download attempt, only a failed corridor access scan." The students who are eligible will sit. The investigation will proceed. Then she looked at Celeste. Miss Ward, eligibility is now in question. Celeste looked at me then, really looked, and what I saw in her face was not remorse. It was betrayal. She felt betrayed by my refusal to be easy prey. It was almost funny. Mara, she said, my name's stripped raw.
Please.
If I miss this final, everything is over. I thought of my mother in the first life, selling her wedding ring to pay for legal advice that went nowhere. I thought of the scholarship office email, application withdrawn due to academic misconduct. I thought of standing outside the hospital pharmacy counting coins. I thought of Celeste on stage dedicating my future to honesty. But I also thought of my mother alive this morning, humming in the kitchen, asking if I wanted extra honey on toast. Rage wanted a speech. The story wanted a slap. I gave her neither. You should have returned your badge early, I said. Priya made a strangled sound outside the glass, half gasp, half laugh, and the absurdity of it cut through the room so sharply that even Officer Marlowe's mouth twitched. Celeste's face crumpled, not because the line hurt, but because people heard it. Public humiliation was the only language she respected. At 10:31, 31 minutes after the scheduled start, we were escorted into separate exam rooms. The board made a decision with the speed institutions use when their own liability is on fire. The main cohort would sit in Hall 1. I would sit in the registrar's conference room under camera with 2 independent invigilators. Celeste would not sit unless cleared, and clearance would not happen before the exam window closed. Mr. Harlan was removed from supervision duties pending investigation. Theo tried to speak to me as we passed through the atrium. Mara, I didn't know. He looked younger than he had that morning, his confidence wrinkled by guilt. In the first life, I had wanted him to know. I had wanted everyone to know. I imagined truth would restore what lies took. But truth is not a time machine, even when rebirth is. It does not make weak people brave retroactively. You didn't ask, I said and kept walking. That was another pattern broken. I did not beg to be believed. I did not collect apologies like bandages. I had an exam to destroy. The strangest thing about sitting the final after watching your rival get stopped by security is that the mitochondria question still expects an answer. Life does not pause for justice. It hands you a pencil and says continue. My hands shook for the first 10 minutes, not enough for the invigilators to notice, but enough that my first diagram looked like it had been drawn on a train. I closed my eyes. In the first life, I never got to finish this paper. I had been pulled from my seat 23 minutes in by Mr. Harlan and a security guard, my classmates staring as if cheating had a smell. The paper had remained on my desk, half answered. For years, I dreamed of it. Not Celeste's tears, not the panel, not even expulsion. I dreamed of the unanswered final, pages waiting for the girl who never returned. Now the pages were in front of me. Question 1. Cellular adaptation under chronic stress. I almost laughed. Hypertrophy, hyperplasia, atrophy, metaplasia. I whispered inside my head and wrote. The exam became a tunnel. Outside it, adults investigated. Celeste cried. Mr. Harlan denied. Students whispered. Inside it, there was only ink, memory, and the clean violence of competence. Every question I answered felt like reclaiming a room in a house that had been stolen. I wrote about oxygen transport, renal compensation, embryological folding, synaptic transmission. I labeled diagrams with a precision sharpened by grief. When my mind threatened to drift to Celeste, I dragged it back with the ruthlessness she had taught me. Revenge could wait. Marks could not. I finished with 14 minutes left, checked every page twice, and sat back as the rain began again outside the conference room windows. The invigilator collected my paper, sealed it in a gray envelope, and asked me to sign the submission strip. My signature looked steady. That felt like a miracle. When I stepped into the hallway, the main cohort had just been released, and the building buzzed with the wild relief of survivors. People pretended not to stare, and stared anyway. Priya reached me first. She did not hug me.
Good.
I was not ready to be touched. I owe you an apology, she said. Probably a huge one, and probably not in a hallway. I studied her face. embarrassed, sincere, afraid I would reject her. For today or for what you were ready to believe? I asked. She swallowed. Both. That answer was better than most. Then give it later, I said. When you can be specific. She nodded, eyes wet, and stepped aside. Theo stood behind her, holding his clear pencil case like a shield. I did not stop for him. Students parted with a new kind of whisper. Not gossip now.
Caution.
The difference mattered. By the time I reached the atrium, Celeste was sitting on the bench where accused students waited, flanked by Officer Reyes and Dr. Sato. Her ribbon had come undone. Without it, she looked less like a golden girl and more like a person who had built a throne out of borrowed sympathy and found it suddenly combustible. She looked up as I passed. Are you happy? She asked. The old Mara would have said no, because good girls are trained to reject the ugliness of satisfaction. The reborn Mara had buried that girl beside too many unpaid bills. I stopped. The atrium quieted again, because apparently my life had become the morning announcement. I'm not happy, I said. I'm prepared. Celeste laughed through her tears. You planned this. I returned a badge. You knew. I learned. Her eyes sharpened. From who? The question was so absurd that for a second I thought she knew about the rebirth, about the years between then and now, about the hospital corridors and the rented room, and the night I closed my eyes with regret, so heavy it felt like drowning. But she meant informant. She meant who betrayed me first. Girls like Celeste always think knowledge must be stolen because that is how they get it. From you, I said. You taught me what happens when I trust people without records. Her face twisted. I was scared. You don't understand what it's like to always be second to you. There was, finally, the honest rot beneath the perfume. Not poverty. Not desperation. Not survival. Second place. A rank. A number printed under mine. I know exactly what second place is, I said. It's still a place. You wanted mine badly enough to erase me. Dr. Sato watched us, without interrupting. Maybe she knew some confrontations are also evidence. Celeste leaned forward, voice dropping. You think this makes you safe? Everyone loves a scandal for a day. Then they get tired. They'll still choose who they like. They always do. In my first life, that would have terrified me because it had been true. Today I held up the stamped receipt. Then I'll keep being unlikable with documentation. By noon, the campus had divided itself into versions of the story. Version 1, Celeste had found a fake badge and panicked. Version 2, Celeste had made the fake badge, but only because Mr. Harlan pressured her. Version 3, Mr. Harlan had orchestrated the whole thing because he favored Celeste. Version 4, which spread fastest because it had the clean satisfaction of truth. Mara returned her badge early. Celeste tried to use a duplicate, and security stopped her before finals. I did not correct every rumor. That was another lesson from the first life. You cannot chase smoke with your bare hands. You open windows. My windows were copies. I submitted a written statement to Dr. Sato before leaving campus. I emailed myself scans of the receipt, manual verification letter, policy, and exam submission strip. I requested preservation of all camera footage from 7 to 10:45, all badge logs, all terminal access records, and all staff room entry records. I copied the National Examination Board, the Scholarship Committee, my mother, and a legal clinic whose free student advocacy page I had memorized in another life. Then I sat on the library steps under the awning and finally let my hand shake. My mother arrived 20 minutes later in her old blue cardigan, hair escaping its clip, face pale from the message I had sent. I'm safe, but come to school. She hurried up the steps and stopped 1 foot away from me as if afraid I might break. Mara? I stood. For one dangerous second, the 17-year-old body and the older grief inside it could not agree on how to move. Then I hugged her so hard she made a small surprised sound. She smelled like laundry soap and honey toast.
Alive. Warm.
Here. I returned my badge, I whispered into her shoulder, and began to cry, which was ridiculous because that was not the part most mothers expected to explain a school emergency, but my mother only held me tighter. Okay, she said softly. Then we'll start there. We did not go home immediately. My mother insisted on speaking to Dr. Sato, and my mother, despite being small and kind and chronically underestimated, had a voice that could make receptionists find supervisors. We sat in a second conference room while the rain painted crooked lines down the glass. Dr. Sato explained that Celeste had been suspended from the exam pending investigation, Mr. Harlan had been removed from all examination duties, and the duplicate badge would be handled as a security breach, not a student dispute. My mother listened without interrupting, hands folded over her handbag. Then she asked, "Was my daughter at any point considered responsible for the duplicate badge?" Dr. Sato glanced at me. "The evidence strongly indicates she was not." "That isn't what I asked." I looked at my mother with something like awe. In the first life, she had been too shocked, too poor, too trusting of institutional language. This time, because I had called her before the accusation could harden, she arrived not as a grieving parent, but as a witness. Dr. Sato accepted the correction.
No.
Because of her early return documentation and manual verification, she was not treated as responsible. My mother nodded once. "Put that in writing today." Dr. Sato did. Watching the sentence appear on official letterhead felt almost violent in its mercy. Miss Marave is not under investigation for badge misuse, exam compromise, or related misconduct. In the first life, I had spent years trying to get one adult to write a sentence that clean. Now it existed because at 7:18, I had placed a plastic card through a glass window. The investigation did not end that day. Stories like this never do, not really. They shed skins. That afternoon, the board searched Terminal 3. The camera showed Celeste entering the staff preparation office at 7:42 carrying a folder and leaving at 7:49 with something tucked under her exam booklet. Mr. Harlan entered 2 minutes later, saw the terminal awake, and locked it. That detail saved him from being named as the creator of the duplicate, but not from negligence. Worse for him, audio from the corridor captured part of a conversation before the briefing, Celeste saying, "If she makes a scene, you'll handle it, right?" And Mr. Harlan replying, "Mara always makes things harder than they need to be." Not enough to prove conspiracy alone. Enough to prove bias. Enough to make every decision he had made about me smell rotten. Celeste's locker contained a practice duplicate printed on a blank access card, 2 failed encoding strips, and a folded copy of the staff room schedule. Her phone contained deleted searches about temporary badge permissions and exam corridor blind spots. She claimed she had researched them for a student council safety proposal. That lie lasted until Priya, furious in the precise way only a former believer can be, submitted screenshots of Celeste's messages from the night before. "If Mara gets dramatic tomorrow, just remember she's been weird all week. Don't let her drag us into it." Another message to Theo. "I'm scared she'll do something reckless if she thinks she won't get first." A third to our class group, phrased like concern, seeded like poison. "Has anyone checked on Mara? She seemed really intense about the scholarship." In my first life, those messages had become the emotional weather before the storm. This time, they became evidence of premeditation. Celeste's parents arrived in a black car at 3 in the afternoon, and for their lawyer was using words like misunderstanding, emotional distress, disproportionate response, and bright future. The school, suddenly allergic to quiet cover-ups, forwarded everything to the examination board. The board, allergic to security breaches, forwarded parts to police youth liaison for assessment. I was not present for most of that. I learned it through official updates and Priya's trembling voice notes, and the way teachers stopped smiling at nothing when I passed. I went home with my mother, ate soup I could barely taste, and slept for 16 hours. When I woke the next morning, my phone had become a battlefield. Apologies, questions, screenshots. People who had not spoken to me in years suddenly saying they always knew Celeste was fake, which was funny because yesterday they had been ready to accept her tears as scripture. Theo sent a message at 2:13 a.m. "I'm sorry. I should have trusted you." I typed 3 replies and sent none. Priya sent one at 8:04. I wrote my statement. I included that I repeated things Celeste told me without checking.
I'm sorry.
That one I answered. Thank you for being specific. Growth, I had learned, often begins where vague guilt ends. Celeste sent nothing. That did not surprise me. Contrition is difficult when you still believe the real crime was getting caught. On Monday, the principal called an emergency senior assembly. In the first life, assemblies had been where the school performed values it failed to practice privately. Integrity, excellence, community. Words polished smooth from overuse. This time, I sat in the third row between Priya and an empty seat Theo was too ashamed to take, and watched Principal Ormond walk to the podium with a face carved from administrative regret. He announced that a security breach had occurred before the national finals, that the breach had been contained before the exam paper was compromised, that one student had been suspended pending external review, and that one staff member had been stood down from examination duties pending an employment investigation. He did not name Celeste. He did not name Mr. Harlan. He did, however, name the policy changes: all badge duplication terminals disabled during exam week, mandatory staff logout protocols, dual authorization for access cards, student right to manual verification without penalty, and automatic preservation of camera footage for any badge anomaly. Then he looked at me for half a second and away again. We also remind our community that unusual caution should not be mistaken for guilt. That sentence rolled through the hall like a dropped marble. Students turned toward me. I looked straight ahead. Apology by policy was still not apology, but it was more than I had received in the old life. I would take it, file it, and demand the rest in writing. The scholarship results were delayed 2 weeks because the board res cord affected candidates under independent supervision. During those 2 weeks, my life entered a strange, suspended state. Celeste was gone from campus, but her absence had weight. Her locker remained sealed with red tape. Her seat in calculus sat empty. Her name was removed from the debate roster, then from the volunteer gala program, then from the honor board nomination list. Each removal made people flinch, as if watching a portrait erase stroke by stroke. I thought I would enjoy it more. I had imagined revenge as warmth. Instead, it felt like standing after a fever. Weak, clear, alive, not exactly happy. The true pleasure came in smaller things. My mother laughing at breakfast. Mrs. Vale slipping me extra peppermint candies for administrative excellence. Officer Marlowe tapping the security drawer when I passed and saying, "Best decision anyone made all week." Priya sitting beside me without demanding instant forgiveness. Theo learning, painfully, that apology is not a password back into someone's life. And me, walking through campus with my head up, no longer trying to look harmless. That was the part nobody tells you about survival. After you stop begging people not to misunderstand you, some will still misunderstand you. But their misunderstanding becomes weather, not a verdict. The first week after the breach taught me that being proven right does not mean everyone becomes kind. It means people who enjoyed doubting you start editing themselves in public. Some classmates approached me with careful faces and sentences that began with "I never said anything bad," but which almost always meant they had said something bad in a group chat and wanted insurance before screenshots surfaced. Others avoided me altogether, as if innocence were contagious in an inconvenient way. The teachers were worse because adults have a special talent for turning their own discomfort into your responsibility. Ms. Farrow from chemistry told me she was glad everything was clearing up and then immediately asked whether I might consider making a statement about forgiveness for the school newsletter. I asked whether the newsletter had ever planned a statement about due process when they thought I was guilty. She blinked as if I had switched languages. Mr. Belden, who taught literature and liked to quote tragedies at teenagers, said this whole experience would make a powerful personal essay one day. I said it would make a stronger policy audit. That shut him up. My mother told me I was becoming sharp. She did not say it like criticism, but I heard the worry under it. At dinner, while she cut carrots into the soup pot, she looked over her shoulder and said, "Don't let what happened make you lonely on purpose." I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to say loneliness was safer than trust, and safety was the only thing I had promised the girl I used to be. But my mother had survived her own quiet wars, and she knew the difference between a locked door and a prison. So the next day, when Priya asked if she could sit with me at lunch and answer any question I wanted, I said yes. I asked why she believed Celeste so easily. Priya did not cry. She did not defend herself with panic or turn guilt into performance. She said, because Celeste made believing her feel like helping and doubting her feel like cruelty. And because you always seemed strong enough not to need help, which was lazy of me. That answer hurt because it was honest. It also gave me a new category for people, not innocent, not enemy, but reparable. Reparable did not mean restored. It meant I could watch without hatred while they rebuilt trust brick by brick. The board required formal testimony the following Tuesday. Not a dramatic courtroom, just a beige meeting room above the district assessment office with a long table, 2 recording devices, a jug of water nobody touched, and a window facing a car park. Still, when I walked in, my knees remembered the disciplinary panel from the first life and almost betrayed me. Trauma is terrible at calendars. It does not care that the year has changed or the evidence has changed or the ending might change. It sees a table and becomes 17 in the worst way. Dr. Sato sat on one side with an external investigator, a retired principal named Mr. Ivers, who had the gentle expression of someone who asked brutal questions politely. My mother sat beside me, not speaking unless invited, a notebook open in front of her. Celeste attended by video with her lawyer and parents. Mr. Harlan attended separately after her, because the board had finally understood that putting them in the same room created too much opportunity for theater. When the recording began, Mr. Ivers asked me to describe why I returned my badge early. I had prepared a safe answer about policy awareness, anxiety over exam day losses, and wanting to minimize risk. All true. Not all the truth. Then I looked at the little red recording light and thought of how many times the first version of me had softened reality because it sounded too strange, too paranoid, too much. Because I believed someone might try to use my badge to implicate me in misconduct, I said. My mother's pen paused. Dr. Sato's gaze sharpened. Mr. Ivers folded his hands. Why did you believe that? I could not say Rebirth. I could not say, because I remember dying with your institution's letter in a box under my bed. So I said the part this world could hold. Because in the weeks before finals, Celeste Ward repeatedly told others I was unstable about rankings, asked questions about badge access that had no student council purpose, and encouraged friends to interpret my normal study habits as suspicious. I didn't have proof of what she intended, but I had enough concern to protect the one object that could connect me to restricted access. Mr. Ivers nodded slowly. You made a risk assessment. The phrase landed gently over the jagged truth. Yes, I said. I made a risk assessment. Celeste's testimony was a masterpiece of almost confession. She admitted using Terminal 3 but insisted she had only meant to see whether temporary badges were as unsecured as students joked they were. She admitted printing a duplicate, but claimed she panicked afterward and intended to destroy it. She admitted carrying it toward the restricted corridor, but said she was looking for a security officer, even though the nearest security officer was in the opposite direction under a sign that said security. She admitted messaging classmates about my behavior, but described it as concern. She admitted feeling overshadowed by me, but rejected jealousy as too simple. Every admission was wrapped in a blanket of context until it looked less like guilt and more like weather. I almost admired the architecture of it. Almost. Then Mr. Ivers asked, why was Miss Vay's student number used rather than your own if your intention was to test system vulnerability? Celeste stared at the camera. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered. Celeste's mother closed her eyes. There was no elegant answer. There was only the truth waiting at the bottom of a very deep well. Because hers had the same exam permissions, Celeste said finally. Mr. Ivers did not move. Several students had the same exam permissions. Celeste swallowed. Hers was the one I knew. Dr. Sato asked, and the one you had been discussing as unstable with classmates. Celeste's face hardened for 1 second. The golden girl was still in there, furious at being cornered by adults who would not rescue her from sequence.
I was scared, she said.
Of what? Of losing everything. Dr. Sato's voice was quiet. So, you created a situation where Mara Vay could lose everything instead? Celeste began to cry, but the recording did not come for her. It only kept blinking. Mr. Harlan's testimony injured me in a different way, because he did not look like a villain. He looked tired, embarrassed, older than the man who had commanded classrooms with polished certainty. He admitted leaving the terminal unlocked for 7 minutes. He admitted Celeste had been in and out of the preparation office under the excuse of printing a form. He denied telling her I was unstable, then corrected himself when the audio transcript was read aloud. I may have said Mara can be intense, he conceded. That was a professional observation. Mr. Ivers asked whether he had documented any concerns about my emotional regulation before finals. No. Had she ever breached exam protocols? No. Had she ever been disciplined for dishonesty? No. Then on what professional basis did you frame her as a likely source of difficulty? Mr. Harlan's mouth compressed. In the first life, that mouth had pronounced me catastrophically flawed. Now it struggled to defend the casual prejudice that made the frame fit. She is ambitious, he said at last. My mother made a sound so small only I heard it. Mr. Ivers looked down at his notes. Ambition is not misconduct. Mr. Harlan flushed. Of course not. Yet when a badge bearing her identity appeared at a restricted corridor in another student's hand, your first recommendation was to delay investigation until after the exam. I was trying to preserve exam conditions. For whom? The question stayed in the room longer than the answer. Mr. Harlan had no good one because the honest answer was not for me. Not for truth. Not for the students who had studied honestly. For the school. For himself. For the comfort of letting the easiest story become the official one. That was the moment I stopped needing him to be punished dramatically. I only needed the record to show what he had been. Not a mastermind, maybe not even malicious enough for the stories people preferred, but dangerous in the way authority becomes dangerous when it trusts its own instincts more than evidence. After the testimony, I went to the bathroom and locked myself in the last stall, not because I wanted to cry, but because my body did not understand that we had survived. My hands were numb. My chest felt too small. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead with the exact pitch of the hallway outside the old disciplinary room, and suddenly I was not a scholarship winner, not a careful strategist, not the girl with receipts. I was the ruined girl again, standing beside my mother's car, unable to explain how a school could delete a future in an afternoon. The panic was so humiliating that anger came to rescue me. I pressed both palms against the stall door and breathed through my teeth.
No. Y whispered.
Not this time. A woman at the sink went quiet. I waited for her to leave, but instead my mother's voice came through the door. Mara, I'm here. Of course she was. She always found me. I opened the door, and she did not ask why I was shaking. She wet a paper towel, pressed it into my hands, and leaned beside the sinks as if we were discussing ordinary things. When I was younger, she said, I thought being strong meant nobody could hurt you. Then I learned it means you know what to do after they do. I looked at her reflection. I'm tired of knowing what to do. I know. I'm tired of being the careful one. I know. I want to be stupid for one day. That made her laugh softly, not because it was funny, but because she knew exactly what I meant. After the scholarship decision, she said, we'll schedule one stupid day. No policies.
No receipts.
Maybe bad movies and too much cake. I breathed out, and the panic loosened. That promise became a tiny light ahead of me. One stupid day, earned by all this unbearable caution. The school tried to manage its image with the grace of a person carrying soup in a paper bag. First, they sent a community well-being update that mentioned stress, rumors, and kindness without mentioning security, falsified credentials, or the fact that their staff protocols had nearly helped destroy a student. My mother read it at the kitchen table, made a face, and drafted a reply so precise I briefly wondered whether she had secretly been a lawyer in another life. She requested correction of the record, confirmation that no adverse suspicion attached to me, and a transparent outline of procedural failures. I added one paragraph insisting that any statement about student well-being include the harm caused when schools dismiss documented concerns as personality issues. The revised notice, sent 2 days later, was still bland enough to survive administration, but it contained 3 useful sentences. A student who returned her badge early assisted in preventing a security breach. No misconduct finding or suspicion applies to that student. The school is reviewing staff assumptions that may affect fair treatment. People screenshotted those sentences like contraband. For the first time, the official story did not require me to disappear inside it. That mattered more than vindication in the cafeteria. It meant future students could point to a line and say, "No, caution is allowed. Documentation is allowed. Manual verification is allowed. Being disliked is not evidence." During the second week, a year 10 girl I barely knew approached me outside the library. Her name was Lonnie, and she had the nervous bravery of someone walking into cold water. She told me a prefect had been borrowing her art room keycard for a committee setup and returning it late. She had felt weird about it but did not want to seem dramatic. "What should I do?" she asked. The question startled me because I had spent so long trying to save only myself that I had not considered becoming useful. I wanted to tell her to trust no one, return everything, assume betrayal, build walls high enough to block the sun. That would have been fear speaking in my voice. Instead, I walked her to Mrs. Vale. We requested a keycard audit, documented the borrowed dates, and got her card reissued with a note that no one else could use it. The prefect turned out not to be plotting anything cinematic. She had been too lazy to request proper access and too entitled to notice Lonnie's discomfort. Still, when Lonnie left the office, she looked taller. Mrs. Vale watched her go and said, "You may have started a very annoying trend." "Good," I said. "Let them all be annoying." That evening, Priya joked that I had become the patron saint of receipts. I told her sainthood sounded like unpaid labor, but I accepted patron demon of documentation. She made it into a sticker. By Friday, half our year had one on their laptops. Be difficult early. The slogan was ridiculous and dramatic and exactly what we needed. Even Theo had one, though he placed it on the inside of his notebook where he probably thought I wouldn't see.
I saw.
I said nothing. Celeste returned once before the final decision, not as a student, but as a daughter between 2 adults and 1 lawyer. I saw her through the administration corridor glass. She had cut her hair to her shoulders, or maybe tied it back so severely it looked cut. Without the ribbon, without the audience, she seemed almost ordinary. Then she saw me and proved she was not. She stepped away from her lawyer and came toward the glass door. "Mara." The receptionist half rose, but I lifted one hand. Not permission.
Control.
We stood on opposite sides of the threshold. The door opened just enough for conversation, but not enough for theater. "My parents want me to apologize," she said. "Do you?" She looked at the floor. "I'm sorry things went this far." I smiled, and she hated it because we both heard the emptiness. Things don't go far by themselves. Her jaw tightened. "You don't know what pressure feels like." The sentence was so spectacularly wrong that for a moment, I simply stared. Then I thought of another life where pressure was a mother's oxygen bill, a scholarship withdrawal, a landlord's notice, a body collapsing under years of delayed grief. "You're right," I said. "Maybe one day I'll learn." Her eyes flashed. There she was. "Everyone thinks you're so perfect now. But you're not. You set a trap." I set a boundary. Same thing, when you want someone to cross it. I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear.
No, Celeste.
A trap hides the danger. A boundary tells you exactly where not to step. You crossed it holding my face in your hand. For the first time, she had no answer. Her lawyer called her name, and she turned away, cheeks burning. That was the last private conversation we ever had. The board's decision arrived on a Thursday afternoon because apparently fate liked Thursdays almost as much as it liked security cameras. Celeste Ward was disqualified from the national finals, suspended for the remainder of the term, and referred for further disciplinary action related to falsification of access credentials and attempted unauthorized entry into a restricted exam area. Mr. Harlan received formal disciplinary proceedings for negligence, failure to follow credential security protocols, and prejudicial conduct. Arden Academy received a compliance warning and mandatory audit. My exam was validated. My score was released under seal to the scholarship committee. I read the email 3 times before understanding the final attachment. Provisional ranking, National Medical Pathway Scholarship. First place. My name. Not restored.
1.
There is a difference. Restored implies the universe handed back something it had misplaced. 1 means I sat with shaking hands after a security breach and wrote until my future had nowhere else to go. My mother cried when I showed her. I did not cry at first. I looked at the screen and felt the years of the first life press against the glass of this one, all the ghost versions of me who had lost, begged, failed, endured. Then I whispered, "We did it," and I was not speaking only to my mother. The award ceremony was smaller than it had been in the first life, partly because the school feared reporters and partly because the board feared speeches. I wore a white dress under my blazer and clipped no badge to my chest. Manual verification had become a private joke by then. Priya gave me a tiny enamel pin shaped like a stamp that said returned. I laughed so hard, I nearly ruined my mascara. When Principal Orman called my name, the applause started politely, then grew as students stood row by row. Not everyone. Some remained seated because loyalty dies slowly when it was never based on truth. I walked onto the stage anyway. Dr. Sato handed me the certificate and said quietly, "Good documentation, Miss Faye." "Good running shoes," I whispered back, and she actually smiled. The microphone waited. In the first life, Celeste had used this moment to sanctify herself. I had no interest in becoming her mirror. I thanked my mother, my teachers who had genuinely taught, the exam board for protecting process, and the students who corrected themselves when evidence demanded it. Then I paused. The hall settled. "People say integrity means doing the right thing when nobody is watching," I said. "That sounds noble, but after this year, I think integrity also means building systems where the truth does not depend on being liked." I am grateful that on finals day, a returned badge mattered more than a rumor. I looked at the security staff standing near the back wall. Officer Marlowe lifted 2 fingers in a tiny salute. "So my advice is simple.
Keep records.
Follow procedures. And when someone tells you that caution makes you difficult, be difficult early." The applause afterwards sounded different from praise. It sounded like recognition. Months later, after the scholarship paperwork was complete and my mother's medical appointments were paid in advance for the first time in our lives, a letter arrived without a return address. I knew before opening it that it was from Celeste. Some handwriting keeps its arrogance even when the words inside claim humility. She wrote that she had transferred schools, that her parents were furious, that Mr. Harlan had resigned before the proceedings finished, that she was in counseling, that she now understood. She had confused achievement with survival. She wrote, "I hated you because you made excellence look calm, and I felt like I was drowning." She wrote, "I know that does not excuse what I did." She wrote, "I am sorry I tried to make the world unsafe for you just because I felt unsafe inside myself." It was better than her hallway apology. Specific. Ugly. Possibly sincere. I folded the letter and placed it in a folder behind the receipt. The manual verification letter, the policy copy, the board decision, and the scholarship certificate. Forgiveness did not arrive like a choir. It arrived, if it arrived at all, as a quiet lack of interest in revenge beyond what justice had already done. I did not write back.
Some doors do not need to be slammed.
They only need to remain closed. On the morning I left for university, I found the old lanyard in the bottom of my drawer. Empty plastic sleeve, blue cord, silver clip. In another life, it had been the leash by which Celeste dragged me into ruin. In this one, it was just an object. I held it for a long time while my mother called from downstairs that the taxi was waiting. The girl in the mirror looked 17 and older than anyone could prove. Her hair was pinned back, her eyes clear, her blazer pressed. She had survived 2 versions of the same morning and learned that fate is not always defeated by grand gestures. Sometimes it is defeated by reading the policy, by arriving early, by asking for a receipt, by refusing to move when the alarm calls your name. I placed the lanyard in the drawer, took my suitcase, and went downstairs. At the door, my mother adjusted my collar the way she had on finals day, and I let her because in this life we still had ordinary tenderness to waste. Outside, the sky was bright after rain. My phone buzzed with a message from Priya. First day of future doctor life. Don't forget to be difficult early. I smiled, locked the door behind me, and stepped into the morning without a badge around my neck, without a rival at my shoulder, without proof clutched in my fist. I had proof stored safely in folders, in systems, in people who had finally learned to look twice. More importantly, I had myself. And this time, when the gates opened, I walked through under my own name.